Hi, my name is Carlo Volpe,
And I'm Desmond Silva,
and
and
welcome to
welcome to
Centerville
Centerville
Voice.
Voice.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to Centerville Voice. Again, my name is Carlo, my good friend Desi. How are you, Des?
Okay, how about you, Carlo?
I'm great, buddy. So, guys, thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for listening. And again, don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the notifications button if you're watching on YouTube. And again, for all the shares, we really appreciate it. Today, folks, we're going to get into a little bit about German history, a little bit about the Nazi Party, and how kind of German got, or the German country itself, Germany got to where they are. Right? Things don't happen overnight. And every time we've often heard about the Nazi Party, we've often heard about Hitler, but because there's really been about 50, 60 years since that time, or maybe more now. A lot of times it kind of gets lost. So let's talk about that. But before we get into that, I want to talk a little about Tulsi, right?
Yep.
Desi, let's talk about Tulsi Gabbard.
Hats off to Tulsi Gabbard. For those of you who don't know, Tulsi is a Democrat. She's actually a representative in Hawaii, and she was the one who was running, one of the candidates running in the Democrat runnings against Joe Biden and Kamala Harris to try and challenge Donald Trump for the U.S. presidency. We haven't heard too much from Tulsi Gabbard until recently, where she finally made a post on Twitter stating the following. Please let us stop the racialization of everyone and everything. We are all children of God and therefore family in the truest sense, no matter our race or ethnicity. This is aloha, love and respect for others. This is what our country and the world needs. Hats off to Tulsi. It's not too often that we hear this coming from her side of the fence, but it's very good when we do hear that they're coming from the fence. So there are people who are on both sides who are against this racialization and this divisiveness that's been going on in the West.
You
So,
know,
and that kind of segues into what we're talking about today with how Nazi Germany got to where it is. It didn't happen overnight. It happened very slowly over several years due to certain circumstances.
Exactly. And you know, Des, that's a great breath of fresh air because what Tulsi speaks is what I grew up hearing the Democrats speak about the unity. We're all equal. Doesn't matter what color you are, black, white, any color, right? And the last couple of years, especially the last year or so, right? You've almost heard from the left saying that all of your problems are because of race. You know what I mean? It's like all of our problems are because of race when we used to be saying, let's forget about race because real problems are aside from race. And I like what Tulsi is basically saying that, hey guys, we're all God's children. And whether you believe it or not, in God or not even, we're all children on the earth. We're all in the same boat, metaphorically, whatever you want to put it, right? So I really like what she's saying. And it speaks volumes to the idea that one of the easiest ways to get people to fight is to segregate them, right? It's to say that we're
Exactly.
different. And then if we're different, then you can say you're better than me or I'm better than you. And then you can say that I'm then disadvantaged or then the oppressor and oppressed comes out, right? So that's kind of where it goes, right? So how do we get into this? Germany, Hitler, right? Germany,
Yeah,
if I could start off correctly,
sure.
was basically got their butts handed to them in World War One.
Exactly.
And
And
after that, yeah, sorry. So after that, basically with the Treaty of Versailles, there was a lot of conditions, a lot of sanctions put on Germany. Just for an example, read off a couple of them, but they were given basically a fine, or they had to pay $33 billion in reparations, right? So in the 1940, well, like 45, 46, 47, whenever that was, or sorry, no, the
oh, it
19,
was the 30s.
World War One, you're right. Yes, before.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of money, even if it's in the 40s. But in the 30s and the 20s, like that's a ton of money. So that's one thing. After World War One, they had to give up their overseas colonies, right?
Yep.
So for a country like Germany that was trying to expand to the whole world, that's a huge blow to them. And then they were, a lot of military kind of limitations as well. So they were forbidden from having any submarines, and they were forbidden from having an air force. So we'll talk in a couple of minutes on how they basically, through Hitler, they just ignored all that, right, and went crazy. But what do you think was it? Do you think was that part desperation, part charisma? Like, what do you think?
Are you talking about Hitler himself?
Exactly.
Yeah.
How that?
So Hitler was a war vet. Like this guy was a wounded soldier coming back from the war. He had been on the front lines.
Yep.
So when he spoke, and he had about the defeat that the Germans faced in World War One, he spoke from experience.
Yeah.
So he really knew what he was talking about. From his perspective. The current governments that gave in to the Treaty of Versailles in Germany was weak, and they weren't strong enough to be able to stand up for the German people.
Right.
So much that the economy of Germany just went down. The mark went down to, like, I don't know, what was the number again?
Something equivalent close to 1 billion German marks was equivalent to $1 US.
Yeah, and people, you would have to actually
Yeah.
actually use wheelbarrows filled with paper money just to get a loaf of bread.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Like it was ridiculous. And there are other countries where this happened, and I know that this happened in a few Slavic countries too. One of my coworkers actually told about my older coworkers back in the 2000s told me about what happened to his family, and where you'd carry a basket full of money, paper money. If you put the basket down, a person would, and you turn around, and you see just the paper money left, to see someone has stolen the basket and left the money.
Oh my God.
That's how bad it was. That's how worthless the money was.
Jeez.
Right. So Germany was in a horrible state after the Treaty of Versailles.
Yeah.
And of course, there was nothing but resentment for the situation that they were in, and resentment. They were in a state of regret.
Yeah. A lot of blame to be fingers pointed.
Yep, a lot of fingers being pointed at who, this person's to blame for this, that person's to blame for that. Why did we lose? Why did we like this? Why are we in this situation right now? Why did they impose all of these sanctions on us? Why did we have this treaty that's ruining our economy, ruining our country? And you have a man who fought in World War I on the battlefield, who now looks at his commanders and those people who led him and his battalions and all that stuff, and his his squadrons and his friends into war. Some of them die on the battlefield. Some of them are wounded, and he comes back furious.
Yeah,
he comes back furious.
Hell bent on redemption, essentially.
Yeah, and so he wanted to try and get things up to the point where Germany no longer has to feel the heel of its opponent, of its adversaries, right?
Okay.
And so he comes back. He becomes a very charismatic speaker. I mean, most of you who have seen whoever has seen Adolf Hitler giving a speech, you could see he's full of fervor. He's motion like this, like this, and like this.
He would fill stadiums, right?
He would fill stadiums and all that stuff. He was so loud and passionate about what he was talking about. Of course, most of us would not agree with what he was saying, especially if we translated it into English, right? Yeah. But even in German, even if we don't understand what he's saying, there's no doubt that he was very passionate and very sincere in what he was saying, regardless of whether what he was saying would be considered evil or not, right?
Well, and I just want to stop you there. And that was a pinnacle point in time, because like you said, just imagine, you come back from the war, you have this essentially a war hero, right? Even though they're defeated, a war hero comes back. He's full of piss and vinegar. He's pissed off. He thinks his leadership is weak. He's blaming them for the state of the economy, the state of the country that they're in, right? Their economic problems, because they gave in to the Versailles Treaty. So I could just imagine how he could easily gain a lot of influence, or not influence, but gain a lot of support, thinking, hey, maybe this guy's got an idea. So
I mean, imagine any veteran, even in our own country here in Canada. Imagine if one of them went through that same thing. They'd be just as pissy as Hitler, right?
And have some ideas and have some passion behind it.
Exactly, they would have some ideas and some passion, and they would always try to figure out a way of trying to get themselves up. Now, one common thing about here's the thing about the people, the German people, is that you had Germans who were living in Germany. Then there were Germans who were living in Austria, and there were also Germans living in, I think, also in Poland and for several other Slavic countries too.
Yep.
So Hitler wanted to unite all of the German people together.
Yeah.
He was an extreme nationalist, and he was like kind of like a big brother whose little brother just got beat up in the schoolyard, and
Yeah.
he's pissed off,
Yeah.
right? And he just wants to get the whole family. He like, basically is calling on dad, calling on mom, calling on uncle, auntie, all the cousins, everyone come home, okay?
Yeah.
We're gonna take a stand, and we're gonna get back at these
Yeah.
guys who wronged us as far as what he was concerned.
Exactly. So to rally troops and build an army too, build a nation,
Exactly.
right? A
And what they
race.
did was they those things where we mentioned in the I think did you mention about the points in the Treaty of Versailles there, Carlo?
Yeah, absolutely. 30 million, 33 billion in reparations, giving up overseas colonies, and then yeah, no having no submarines and no air force. But there was a little bit more too. Yeah.
There's more to it, but the thing is, he basically completely went against the Treaty of Versailles. He broke it.
Yeah.
Because they started building all those things that they were not supposed to do according to the treaty.
Yeah.
Now he rose to power very gradually and through the Nazi Party. So he joined the Nazi Party, and it was the National German Workers Party, right?
Yeah.
And their aim was to bring up the working man in Germany. And they brought in things like free healthcare, free education, free company shares for working people, so that they could actually hold ownership of part ownership in what they were building up in the company, so to feel like, oh, I am actually building up something for my company. I am part owner in this thing, right? So kind of like owning a stock in the company, right?
Okay.
And so and he brought all these. There were a whole bunch of different points that he had on the Nazi platform that was there for their campaign platform, right, for election and all that stuff. And they used the Jews and the Slavs as scapegoats. So one thing is that, and this is a tactic from Genghis Khan actually, where if you look at Genghis Khan, historically speaking, the Mongol tribes were usually all separated. Genghis Khan managed to rally them all together under a common cause and common enemy, right? Genghis Khan was what he used to say was along the lines of, "My children will eat from golden plates and drink from golden cups," right? That was his idea, and he wanted the same thing for all of his people, right? And so you had this group of nomadic raiders who went around raiding all across, Eurasia, as far west as Europe and as far or far east as China, right? And very, very effectively too, despite the fact of their limited weaponry. Genghis Khan was brilliant military mind, but the fact that he basically rallied the people against a common enemy, for a common cause or common enemy, means him against the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Hitler had that exact, very similar type of mentality, except he made the enemy not just the rest of the world, but also got it to the point where Jews and Slavs, so the Slavic nations like Czechoslovakia, Poland, and all those Eastern European countries, and also even the communists, like in the Soviet Union, they were seen as the enemy.
Yeah, subhuman even a lot of times we call them.
They called the Jews and the Slavs subhuman. They didn't see them as part of the Aryan race, which they believed that the German people were part of. This Aryan race, of course, is something that's not unique to Germany. Even countries like India have had ideas of an Aryan race coming down into India in ancient texts. You'll see that they have a mention of an Aryan race.
But it's interesting because, like you said, it takes something to rally people, right? A common enemy, a common even if it's not a common enemy, but a common good. Oftentimes, right? Hey, let's build roads, or let's get to the moon, right? That's whatever.
Exactly.
So
and
that's exactly what happened, right? So he said, let's have the scapegoats. These people are causing our problems. The West, the Allies are causing our problems. Let's do it. Let's build. And it got crazy. It got out of hand.
Exactly. As opposed to like because like Hitler, when he was also one of his key points was again world conquest, right?
Yes.
He was all for dominating the world.
Mhm.
The big difference between what drove him and what drove the Americans, again to rally against guys, rally behind people like John F. Kennedy, right? John F. Kennedy was, let's go to the moon,
Yeah.
right? We're going to be the first ones to go to the moon, which I think that's a nice thing to have, right?
Sure. For a common good is better than a common
Yeah,
enemy.
it's common good is better than a common bad, right?
Yeah.
Even if you look at like Donald Trump, a lot of people like to say that Donald Trump was like a Nazi. Donald Trump was far from anything like a Nazi at all.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, Donald Trump is one of the first president to actually be pro-LGBT, and also his favor with the racial minority groups was actually increased during his 4 years.
Well, that's the thing. People don't realize that he's an ultimate capitalist, and people don't realize that.
Yeah, and what it is that he just what his rally cry was: the economy's crap, right? Things are going down.
Yeah.
He goes to the Afro community and tells them, "You've been voting Democrat all these years and you've gotten nowhere. What do you got to lose?"
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and you said honestly, like Trump's rally cry was make America great again, build back
Exactly.
America, right? So that's the common good as well. That was like a moonshot almost for
Exactly.
as opposed to painting an enemy. But just to link back to Hitler, like it's common that, or it seems common that throughout history, we found enemies, we found someone to blame our problems with, right? Or blame our problems on. And then that fueled all sorts of things, because we haven't even talked about the atrocities that Hitler got into, which was obviously terrible. But what do we see there that we see remnants of today, or sparks of today, right?
Yep.
And because we see it in the administration, we see it in the Biden, the Kamala Harris, we see just because there are people that are in minorities, right, that are in power, it doesn't mean that their party is still not being segregated. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but the Democratic Party, just because there are minorities within the party, doesn't mean that they're not being segregation. Yes.
Well, yeah, what's happening now is that like you do have people who are minorities in the Democrat Party, but then you also have people who are minorities in the Republican Party as well, just as much.
Yeah, but I guess what I'm saying is that for the Democrats to be focusing on race being an issue now, it's almost surprising to me, really.
It is surprising because
they should be the last ones. They should be the last people saying that.
Yeah, I mean that's what most people would think, right?
Yeah.
Because it was all they were always like they're always about everyone make love not war, the hippie type
No
of
Child Left
scenario,
Behind,
right? That was there, right?
All that stuff, right? Like
Yeah.
No Child Left Behind, all that stuff. Okay, growing up in the 80s and the 90s, right? Everybody's equal and love everybody and all that stuff. And
exactly.
All these social welfare programs, it was for that.
Yeah, I mean the classic liberal is not what we have today on the far left, right? The classic liberal is actually more closer to the modern day conservative than it is to the far left. When you think about it in terms of values, the conservatives, modern day conservative, they're against racialization. Yeah. The classic liberal was against the racialization. The modern day conservative, they're against being divisive divisive at playing identity politics. Yeah. The liberals back in the day were also, back in the 70s, they were also against that type of stuff. These days, the left wing is they're promoting racial segregation and through identity politics, right?
Well, and they're suggesting, if I'm understanding it right, they're also suggesting to remove democratic processes. So that's a crazy combination, right? One of the things that made us great, I think, was the democracy plus capitalism.
Yeah.
Right? So if you try and mess with those numbers.
Yeah, and the thing is if you got, if we take it all the way here to Canada, again, like I spoke before, we've had we've had people, like for instance, what is it, like Justin Trudeau, who was basically taking away free speech from certain people, or Kathleen Wynne, Kathleen Wynne was taking away free speech from certain people by preventing them from having free speech in certain areas, right? You had, like, there was that one priest who was arrested for just putting a sign saying that free speech is one of the pillars of Western society, right?
Yeah.
And because it happened to be close to an abortion clinic,
Wow.
he was arrested. He was arrested.
That's
It didn't
crazy.
say anything anti-abortion or anything. It just said
Yeah.
free speech is one of the pinnacles of
Yeah.
Western
But
society.
he should also be able to say that he's anti-abortion as well.
But he never did.
No, but he should, like I'm saying, he should be.
He
So
should be able to. Yes,
yeah,
he should be
say
able
whatever you
to.
want.
That's fine. Like if you have a bunch of people who are like people holding signs by an abortion clinic, praying the rosary.
Well, that's the thing,
really
right? It's just like everything else we were talking about. When these rights start getting, when your freedoms and rights start getting eroded, and they start taken away, and a lot of people, like we say earlier, some people say, "Well, I don't care about that because that's not my right, or that's not my thing. I care about." But when you've been censored or you've been canceled, then it's to make a difference, right? So what do we like? We have to fight that, and maybe I don't even know where I'm getting at with this, but like what the constant fight against something like what Hitler was doing and these other powers,
Yep.
How
Another thing that Hitler did was he actually got rid of his political opponents. He silenced them in one way, shape, or form. And that's again happening today. I mean, look at what happened to Donald Trump on Twitter and Facebook, right? He got silenced, right?
Sure, Hitler got people. He did. He got like kind of like a War Measures Act, kind of emergency act, kind of changed in Germany where free speech was, changed and there were securities and I see that, and that happens every time. Every time things start going downhill, the first thing to go is their free speech. The first thing to go is public, gatherings, associations, stuff like that.
There is even one thing that mentioned in the article that a quote from Tulsi Gabbard. So it says, "Okay, where does this cancel culture lead us? You see the final expression of cancel culture in Islamist terrorist groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda, who basically go and behead those who they deem to be infidels or heretics in order to silence them, in order to protect others from being misled, quote unquote, misled, from by those heretics, by those ideas in the eyes of an ISIS and or Al-Qaeda or Al-Qaeda. So basically, the bad idea is that ISIS and Al-Qaeda, I'm getting tongue-tied on the word
heretics.
Heretical. I feel like Porky Pig today right now.
No problem. No, I get you, because it's basically they're the ultimate cancel culture.
Exactly. That's, if you want to look at what
cancel culture referring to that,
like in other countries, just don't look too far. Just look at just go to the other side of the world. It's right there in the Middle East.
Yeah.
Right. It was there during the Spanish Inquisition in Spain. Right. Centuries ago. It was there with the Salem witch hunt here in the West down in the United States in Salem. Right. It's
almost like freedom.
And it was there with the Nazis.
Yeah. Well, and it's almost like freedom of speech is essential, of course, but it needs to be maintained, because every idea that we have eventually, has to be evolved. It has to be changed, and it has to, so the idea of that one thing is written in stone forever is, it's just not going to be, it's not going to hold true.
No. Like there are certain things that are absolute, like,
sure. Like,
but the thing is, but there are other things that are, but when it comes to like race being, racism and hatred towards another person just because they're different, these are things we know that these things lead to bad things down the road that will affect everybody in general. And unfortunately, we're having a lot of youth who are being radicalized, not youth and like even adults, like older folks too, who are being radicalized and who are essentially believing this type of stuff. I know one thing where it showed Steven Crowder. He actually went undercover with one of his colleagues, and they infiltrated Antifa.
Okay.
They actually infiltrated Antifa because people were saying, "Oh, Antifa doesn't exist" and all that stuff. Oh no, they exist. They're very underground. They use encrypted texting apps for communication. They actually own weapons like knives, sawed-off shotguns, rifles.
I mean, they sound like a terrorist organization to me.
They are essentially, for all intents purposes, the very definition of a terrorist organization.
Yeah, but the left won't label them that way.
No, the left won't label them that way at all. Because
And,
the thing
and even
is,
saying that, I have to say that when I say the left, I feel like I'm still part of the left, but I'm on the fence, of course, right? Like to the whole show of Centerville Voice is that
yeah, both of us are moderates. That's the thing.
exactly, and in the classic liberal sense or the classic, yeah, it's crazy because any organization that was against peace and order, right, was terrorist organizations before, and now it depends on what political side you're on, and that's the problem.
Exactly. And if you look at Antifa, Antifa are anarchists for all intents and purposes. So that they're against peace and they're against order, right? Yeah. So how on earth is that helping anything? That's a terrorist organization right there, right? Yeah. So and the thing is, the cops, when they recorded all of this stuff, Stephen Crowder he and his crew, they recorded everything, and they handed over their results to the police. It turns out the police were following the same people that they were on, right? Trying to get evidence on them. So when Crowder handed over the evidence to the police were like, they were really, really thankful and really grateful. Yeah. They took the evidence and they used it against those people. Yeah. But the news, when they went to give it to like ABC and MSNBC and all them, they were like, okay, yeah, and they didn't take it. When the news,
it's not newsworthy.
It's not newsworthy, but you know what they did? They waited until something bad happened and then reported on that.
Yeah. I'm seeing a small trend that I think is growing, and I hope it's keeps on growing. I love it. It's police forces. First of all, it's people standing up and really supporting our police forces, and we need to, because things like law and order isn't a crazy thing to say. That's what our society is based off of, law and order. I know that got a bad rap because Trump was saying law and order, but I love the fact that people are standing behind police officers more and more these days, and I like the fact that police officers are standing up as well and speaking out. They're doing that in Ontario and Canada. They're doing that all over the place, and I feel like it's changing. I feel like the pendulum is swinging again, and maybe I'm being optimistic because I am optimistic, but I feel like the idea of the policing is going to turn around. You're going to see more and more people. Just to bring up, LeBron James made a ridiculous comment. Other people are making these ridiculous comments about the idea that, maybe we acted too fast. And there's the meme going on these days, right? And if you're a police officer, you're in a dangerous situation, you got to call LeBron James first to see what to do. But that's how ridiculous it is, because how would, not just any basketball player, but anybody who is outside trying to put yourself in their shoes, right? You can't make a decision. You can't make a call for that police officer in that situation. Not only that, most people looking at the situation, the footage looks like it's justified, but that's not even my judgment, right? So that's why this is just another example of how somebody like LeBron James, amazing basketball player, but great, right? He's just, I guess he's just in a place to speak his commentary as we are, right?
Yeah, but the thing is that he's jumping to conclusions without checking the video, checking both sides of the story. Yeah. That's not exactly a good approach if you're going to make any type of any type of things, any type of claims there. Now, like whatever the case is, that we do research on the topics that we look at, right?
Of course, if we're trying to be reasonable, right? We're never going to lay blame. What I'm going to always do, and I'm thinking what you're doing is like, hey, let's investigate. Let's look at it from a different perspective, right? Let's really dig into this. So let's wrap this up, Des.
Yeah.
The idea that we can't. I heard something a couple months ago, and I want to just kind of just say what I want to say about it. But I heard a couple months ago, well, we could never get to the point where Nazi Germany got to. Well, we could. We could never get to the point where Stalin, Russia got to, and the Soviet Union. Well, we can actually get to these points. So I just want to kind of make a point for anybody who's listening out there, young or old or whatever. If you're old, you definitely know that we've been through hell in life and we've been through all these different situations. But the young people, oftentimes, they don't think that that we can go through it. And we definitely can, right? And we're not far. We're only a couple bad decisions.
2021. Typical thing when young folks do. it's the current year, right? It's the current year. Like they'll always say something like that. You go back 3 years ago, they're like, it's 2018.
I know.
Like this is not gonna happen, and this is different. And like, no, it's not. It's
well, that's the problem is that like
assume that you can't repeat what your elders did wrong as well.
Exactly.
You're human, and if you don't learn from your elders, if you don't learn from history and what happened with them, if you learn from people who came before you, you're going to repeat that, especially if you don't listen to history itself.
Exactly. Every generation has to fight with the generation above it, right? And every generation has to mature. And I think that's part of it too, right? When a generation matures, I think that's part of that natural thing from the liberal to kind of a conservative and back and forth, right?
Oh yeah.
But I don't know. What do you think? You're good?
Honestly, I just think that we should just make it sure that like take some lessons from Nazi Germany. I mean, it's there. What happened in Nazi Germany was horrible. Like seriously, but it doesn't mean that you should burn the books on that. And here's an example of why we should not burn off and censor and cancel out bad stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. We need that bad stuff so that we learn from it and we don't repeat it over again. And if we, and this is a very good example of stuff that makes stuff from history, like this stuff that happened back in the 20s and the 30s and 40s.
Yeah.
And it's being repeated almost a century later.
Just think of this for a second. If we actually burn our physical books, we can change anything online today. History can now be changed.
Yep.
Right? If you actually get rid of physical books, I mean, what's the next generation going to actually use to validate anything? It's going to be hard, you know. I'm not saying anybody validates with books anyway these days, but no, it's a good reminder. It's like we can't forget our history, the good and the bad. It all has to be there so we don't repeat it.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for listening. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the notification so you get all the notifications again. Des, thanks again, my brother.
You too. Thanks, McCullough. And we'll see you guys in the next video.
Have a great night. Peace.
Peace.
Hi, and thanks for watching this episode of Centerville Voice. If you like what you see, don't forget to share, like, comment, and subscribe. And if you're watching this on YouTube, also click on the notifications icon to make sure you'll get notified on all of our new episodes every Friday. By sharing and liking this episode and all of our episodes, it really helps to promote the channel. And by sharing these episodes, it helps to promote our word and get the word out. If you like what you see and hear, please consider becoming one of our supporters on Patreon. 10% of all Patreon supporter donations we receive go directly to our charity of the year. This year, our charity of the year is the Terry Fox Foundation. You can visit us at centervillevoice.com to learn more and engage with us on one of our social media platforms. Thanks for your support, and we'll see you again in the next episode. Peace.